We are bringing you our new breakdown of exactly what's happened this past week, which was really the last week of arguments in this historic criminal trial of Donald Trump, the first ever for a former president, as you certainly know by now. Now, this final week was a short one, but a lot actually happened. Michael Cohen was back on the stand, finishing his 4 days of testimony, and Trump's lawyers began and ended their case. So we basically in 1 week saw the DA and the defense team both rest. And we saw the defense witnesses who at times stumbled. Here's how it played out.
The defense wrapped up with Michael Cohen after 3 days of cross-examination.
It was a grueling 3 days.
The prosecution has now rested its case. The defense has also just now called its first witness.
Robert Costello back on the stand later this morning after yesterday's fireworks.
He was nearly tossed from the witness box, and his entire testimony was nearly stricken from the record.
An extraordinary moment.
His whole attitude on the stand could have the defense team rethinking its strategy of calling him at all.
The defense has rested its case after calling just 2 witnesses, but Donald Trump did not testify in his own defense.
That's how it went down, and it was action-packed. Now, Michael Cohen's cross raised some doubts about him as a witness, and we've covered that. We don't know how the jury will take it, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. Indeed, this man who's on the stand alleging and providing evidence alleging business fraud by his old boss, Donald Trump, had to admit under oath that he himself stole from the Trump Organization. Prosecutors also got their turn with Cohen on redirect, returned to the bottom line where they basically said, were you too busy to get Trump's approval on this Daniels payment? And Cohen confirmed, no, he was not. The point is, it mattered, and he says he got the confirmation, and the prosecutors are going to try to continue to turn this jury, both in the last week we saw and in their closing arguments, to look back at why we're hearing from Cohen. Not because he's a model citizen and not because he's on trial, but because he was the person Trump picked to be involved in all this stuff, and he remains the key witness. The jury also heard this very simple statement that you've seen in any trial, fictional, Law and Order, or real. Quote, Your Honor, the people rest. That is the only time we think any prosecutors anywhere in this country will be able to say that about defendant Donald Trump. This is, of course, the only trial scheduled to conclude by the election. Now, the evidence they've supplied means the people, that's the DA representing the people of New York, say they have proven every element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. But that's their case. Trump's lawyers got to stand up and start their counter-arguments. They called this one lawyer linked to Cohen, who you saw in that highlight reel we showed you. This is someone that Giuliani and Trump have tried to use to discredit Cohen. His name's Robert Costello. He also faced the grand jury, and he had a tough go of it this week. If you followed our coverage, I've told you, we're going to tell you exactly what happens, not whether it's what you hoped happened, not whether the side you like is winning or losing, although everyone's free to have strong feelings in this case. But we're going to tell you what's really happening. And for Costello, the Trump defense witness, the key longest witness they used, it was a disaster. He was rebuked by the judge for antics on the stand. He was interrupting. The judge found him arrogant and contemptuous and said so, and scolded Costello, quote, if you don't like my ruling, you don't say geez, you don't give me side eye, you don't roll your eyes. Again, I'm going to show you exactly how the judge put it. This is not our commentary here. This judge, who I've been in the courtroom, has been very fair throughout, even measured, kind of mellow at times. He said this witness, above all others, was, quote, contemptuous. That is a specific legal term. It means that you could be held in contempt, although the judge did not try to jail him that day, probably because it would become too much of a distraction. Now, some legal experts said that the Trump defense lawyers would have been better off not calling this troubled witness at all. And it was after that witness that the defense rested their case and said they've completed their mission and they don't need Trump to testify. And he has every right not to testify, as I've told you. So they had about 2 days in control and they finished. They called those 2 witnesses. That's compared to 20 by the DA, a mismatch that is normal, that is routine, because the DA, the prosecutors, have the burden. So they have the burden of providing witnesses and evidence. The defense doesn't have to do anything. Here they called a couple people to poke what they thought would be a couple holes. The jury was sent home, and the lawyers have been hashing out towards the end of the week the jury instructions.
Testimony now complete. Jurors were sent home, and the final phase of the trial got underway.
A crucial hearing started about the nature of the jury instructions.
What will be the last words to the jury before those 12 men and women decide the fate
of Donald Trump in the hush money cover-up trial.
The final showdown between the prosecution and the defense set to take place next Tuesday, when both sides present their summations before the jury.
These jury instructions matter a lot. They might matter more than closing arguments, which are a big deal, and of course we'll be covering. That's the last thing the jury hears on the substance. But the last thing the jury hears on the rules matters a lot. It comes from the judge. It has that authority. They're read out. And the lawyers here are clashing about exactly what goes in those instructions. And all of this will go to guide how this jury considers what Trump knew and what he intended. I've told you this as fair as I can. Part of the allegations here, part of the crimes, have effectively been proven, by which I mean when you have the paperwork and it's lying and you have Donald Trump's signature on it, you've proven the basic element of the fraud. That is, this stuff isn't what they said it was, and they lied about it. And you have Cohen and paperwork showing that. But that is not the whole case, as you've heard, and you need to have Trump's intent on that, as well as the secondary issue, the second thing about this campaign crime. Now, Trump's lawyers wanted to take all of this, what I just referred to in simple form, and try to make it even more complex with a higher kind of burden than the law might require. At times, they were basically asking for special treatment. And I've told you, they have the right to make these requests. The judge has been through this rodeo before, and he's in charge, and he can just say, no, that's a ridiculous request. They did make some ground on some issues, but when they asked the judge to consider the extraordinarily important nature of the case, basically the, hey, our defendant was president defense, the judge said, I'm not going to change the law. I'm not going to do that. In other words, you can't just say, hey, this guy's important in some generalized sense. Remember, no one's above the law. Now, Trump had also been seen dozing off in court throughout the course of this trial, which is a contrast to how he was during these jury instruction arguments. Again, sometimes Donald Trump, in politics and in court, he plays a more disengaged or more aloof person than he actually is. Remember, he's a reality show star. He's an actor in many ways. And suddenly we saw that he could perk up and pay a lot of attention. There was no napping during the debate over the jury instructions, which suggests that this defendant knows exactly how important they are. Now, as I mentioned, on Tuesday, the jury hears the closing arguments. And the judge has told the jurors they may have to stay late, with the idea being that you can see the timeline here, that in fairness to everybody, you set aside enough time here after the break. Everyone can go, rest up and all that, just like they're human beings. But then the jury sits down, and according to the judge, he's hoping to have them all hear these arguments, perhaps finish them on Tuesday, and then turn to deliberations on Wednesday. And if you thought this thing wasn't transparent without cameras in the courtroom during the trial, well, jury deliberations are, of course, secret completely. So hour by hour, we will know nothing about what they're doing, what the vote might be, what they're thinking, what the debates are, unless and until they submit questions that can be read out to the judge in court, ask for evidence, or announce their decision. We don't know how long the deliberations will take. We don't even know which parts of this case will matter most to the jury. There are some big things that we think will matter. Stormy Daniels, for example, testifying about something that Trump says through his lawyers never happened is a big deal. Her lawyer is coming up in this special, which I think could be interesting to hear from. Michael Cohen, both what he said, basically eyewitness to the crime, and then what he was attacked on. But does he tell the truth? Those are the kind of things we could infer the jury will care about, but we don't know. And I say that not as an exercise, not as observation, but as the actual humility of our justice system when it is supposed to work. We are not supposed to know in advance or from the outside. We can watch, we can observe, we can report. But it is what happens inside among those jury members, a jury of your peers. That's all that matters in this courtroom in the week ahead.
The former president coming face to face with adult film actress Stormy Daniels.
This isn't what I want to be known for.
Riveting, bombshell, sometimes icky testimony.
Was it hush money to stay silent?
Yes, I was concerned for my family and their safety.
This is her lawyer, Clark Brewster. Couldn't be prouder of my client.
The cross was right up her alley, and she dealt with it well.
She was not going to let, her story be mischaracterized.
Stormy Daniels is a key witness in this trial. She spent about 8 hours on the stand. Her testimony is crucial to whatever happens next. And we are joined now by her aforementioned lawyer, Clark Brewster. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Ari.
What do you think she got across as a witness about the things she knew from her own experience, primary knowledge, in this trial?
Well, the thing I think that she really brought to the courtroom was the genuineness, the openness, the transparency, the ability to deal with the cross, and go through the facts, even if there were contradictions in her previous statement, to explain why. And I believe she appeared to be very credible, very genuine, and the jury got to see a person that experienced this, what happened to her, and I think she related it very well in that courtroom.
Yeah, and we've seen different approaches to cross-examination over the trial. We're now joining us on this special, so we have it all. I think it's fair to say that Michael Cohen had a rougher cross-exam. He certainly had to concede not only falsehoods, but criminal and other acts, which is known because he's a convict. And Ms. Daniels is not in that same position. And over time, it became clear that her cross was not the hottest or worst moment, that she did pretty well, I think it's fair to say. I do want to show that they discussed with her, well, what about the $130,000 and what her motivations were? She said, I don't care about the amount. It was just get it done. The money didn't matter to me. And they had this back and forth. Of course, the whole thing is about money. And the Trump attorney was also able to say, well, but you didn't know what Trump's involvement was. Indeed, at the time, as we've all since learned, the money came out of a Michael Cohen loan. And she said, no, not directly, no. Does any of that, in your view, matter to the core issue, Donald Trump's guilt? How should people understand what she said there?
Well, I think what really heated up the need to quiet her was the Access Hollywood tape. And when that broke, there was kind of a fevered effort on the Trump side of things to try to quiet as many women as they could. And two that we know about, obviously, are Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels. So that was the motivation. That's what set it afire. And Stormy obviously wouldn't have known what was going on behind the scenes on the Trump side, but she certainly knew what was going on from her perspective. And from her perspective, she thought, if this is documented and dealt with in a way, if something happens to me, I'll feel as if I have at least some protection that it's documented and known about. So that was her plan. And it was either to go public and reveal what happened so it was a matter of record, or have it documented in the form of a non-disclosure agreement with the payment of some money at least to document that. And that's what she did.
In the questioning, Trump's lawyers seem to suggest or argue that Ms. Daniels' work, that her career somehow makes her less than credible, or even in their argument somehow a questionable individual. I don't know whether they'll return to that in closing. Do you think they crossed a line there?
Well, if they crossed the line, I think the jury saw who she really was and what she dealt with in her life and how she dealt with it. She's had incredible success as a person in not only that industry, but the film industry, and what she's chosen to do since being so involved in film. So I think that falls flat. But I do believe that was the narrative that he believed to take advantage of her, that she was in this industry and that she would not tell people, or that she could bring more women into his sphere. So, I mean, the very thing that they're accusing her of now is what made her a target for him, in my view.
And Clark, it's no secret to you or viewers that being Stormy Daniels' lawyer is a certain kind of job with exposure, political heat. We have the past lawyers up. Keith Davidson ended up testifying in this trial, one of the early witnesses. Michael Avenatti famously represented her and was then convicted of crimes both related to that representation and other crimes, as you know, has been and is still in prison. Since you're here, we heard from him. It was his first jailhouse interview in some time at the dawn of this trial. And since you're here, I want to give you the benefit of responding because he did say things about the history with your client. Take a listen.
I think this is the wrong case at the wrong time, Ari. I think that the case is in many ways stale at this juncture. You're talking about conduct that occurred some 8 years ago. It had been represented to me that she had not attempted to extort Donald Trump and the campaign in the waning days of 2016, that they had come to her. And I believed her when she told me that repeatedly. Unfortunately, in early 2019, I came to learn that that was not true.
He no longer represents her. You do. Your response?
Well, an interesting perspective from a guy that's been convicted of extortion, convicted of fraud, convicted of embezzlement. I mean, to suggest there's some kind of extortion scheme when, in fact, he actually was engaged in extortion in the Nike case is quite interesting. In 19, I began representing Stormy in early March of 19, late February, early March, and I was involved, and I had the conversations with Avenatti that revealed that we knew he had forged her name and embezzled the money. He had been completely quiet, was not returning her phone calls, had just ghosted her for weeks. The idea that he come into the knowledge that she was doing something wrongful and his ethics were so strong that he had to withdraw from representing her is nonsense.
Understood. And again, you represent her now, so we wanted to get you on that. Final question, sir. Well, you're smiling. Go ahead. You have more?
No, I find Avenatti's ability to attempt to reinvent himself to be quite interesting. But
fair enough. In closing, and the final question, do you have any views of what you expect when the jury gets the case? What does this ultimately mean? And whatever the result may be, to your client, Ms. Daniels, who I think it's very fair to say has been through a lot.
She has, and it's hard to predict what jurors think. And no matter what you might think, you think one of them will do, when they get into the deliberative process, different results occur. So it'll be really interesting to see their verdict. I think it's going to benefit the prosecution greatly to be able to go last and to explain the evidence in a way that's powerful, that meets the jury instructions. I don't believe there's any real doubt that the criminal acts occurred. The question is whether this jury will convict him. That's the issue.